Hola, ¿cómo están? Buenas tardes. Thank you for being back and following directions. Friends, colleagues, and supporters, welcome back. And thank you for being part of day 2 of our NALEO 39th Annual Conference. Voy a esperar a ver que se siente esta gente. Hey! Before we get started with today's National Leadership Luncheon Plenary, as a veteran of our NALEO conference attending myself, I want to provide you with a few pieces of our NALEO annual conference advice, and that I hope will bolster again your experience. I know we've had a 2-year hiatus, but first, attend as many plenaries and breakout sessions as you can. And I'm really going to ask you to challenge yourself and, don't be afraid to ask questions and to be engaged. Be brave and push yourself to grow and expand your expertise. Second, really embrace the power of the NALEO network and really foster the relationships that you build here so that when you return home, you have a network of folks to help you and help you deal and answer with some of the tough questions and decisions you have to make when you go back home. When I attended my first conference after getting elected in 2010, I really built my personal and professional relationships with some incredible people from all over the country who I still cherish to this day. Of course, Pauline Medrano being one of them. I love you, Pauline. These folks are who I lean on, who I can talk to, something I wouldn't trade anything else in the world for. Nurture the relationships that you make here, and finally bring others into the NALEO network. That is critical that we continue to expand our network and have more people join us so they can benefit not only from the network, but from the plenaries that we have. So invite them to participate in our programming for NALEO members and to next year's conference, of course. And you'll hear a little bit about that tomorrow. Tell them about the NALEO and the incredible work that we do. Really, the true power of the NALEO network, again, is sharing the experiences with others so that we can all grow and build upon what is already the largest gathering of Latino public elected officials in the nation. Give yourselves a round of applause. We wouldn't be here where we're at today without each other. And together we can continue to build on the progress we've made and that we continue to make for the future. Now please help me welcome to the stage our host sponsor representative, a dear friend of mine, Ms. Laura Parra, Senior Advisor from Edison International.
Thank you for the introduction, and NALEO for giving us the opportunity to be here with you today. I'm Laura Parra, and I'm here on behalf of Edison International, the parent company of Southern California Edison, to once again welcome you to NALEO's 39th Annual Conference. Edison is participating in NALEO's conference to demonstrate how important it is that we come together to achieve clean energy future and tackle the threat of climate change. As one of the nation's largest electric utilities, serving approximately 15 million people in a 50,000 square service mile area, we believe that our company should look like the communities we serve. It's a future in which all communities, regardless of their skin color or income level, can breathe clean air and enjoy the benefits of more clean energy jobs. We also know that in society, we must now reduce emissions at a much faster rate than ever before to mitigate the impacts of climate change. For a number of years, Edison has been analyzing how we get to 2030 and 2045 goals in a way that is feasible, equitable, and efficient for our communities. Pathway 2045 is Southern California Edison's plan for enabling a clean energy future for California, laying out a path for growth in carbon-free energy resources needed both on the generation and customer side. With Pathway 2045, we are thinking ahead of how we continue serving our customers in the future of continuous transformation. However, we must start developing critical grid capabilities today to ensure that they are in place when needed, and we cannot do this alone. Achieving a reimagined grid for clean energy calls for a collaborative, industry-wide approach to be most effective and less expensive to implement. It requires all parties, policymakers, innovators, customers, utilities, working together to shape the technology landscape of our future. And Edison is committed to being part of that goal. California has initiated and implemented many policies in this space and this transition in clean energy. And we need more leaders like you to help us tackle the challenging steps ahead with new perspectives and ideas. To close, I just want to reinstate once again the type of future that Edison is striving for. It's a future where Californians achieve serious greenhouse gas reductions through investments in technologies. It's a future in which we learn from the pandemic and emerge more sustainable and resilient together. Our company recognizes these important goals, and we will continue to make investments where it matters the most. Thank you to NALEO for their incredible partnership with Edison International, and we welcome you once again to this amazing conference. Thank you.
Thank you again. Let's give Ms. Laura Parra and Edison International another round of applause, please. Now I'm excited to present the NALEO President's Award, established in 1997 by NALEO's second president, New Mexico House Speaker Raymond G. Sanchez. This honor recognizes the efforts of individuals and organizations whose work has made NALEO and NALEO Educational Fund and our Latino community much stronger. This year's recipient has been integral in our success through its longstanding support and service to our mission and visibility for many, many years. This organization has remained a dedicated partner and a host sponsor of today's National Leadership and Luncheon Plenary. It brings me great pride to present the 2022 NALEO President Award to NBC Universal Telemundo Enterprises. As we know, a leading Spanish language media company really dedicated to reaching Latinos across the nation and uplifting and empowering the Latino community. Our national media partner, Telemundo, has amplified the work of NALEO and the NALEO Educational Fund in countless ways, ensuring the widespread highlighting of our mission and work, helping us to serve Latino communities nationwide. Telemundo has served as a megaphone for our civic engagement work, helping us reach millions of our community members with messages about voter engagement, U.S. citizenship, and census participation. Telemundo has demonstrated time and time again why the network is incredibly deserving of the 2022 NALEO President's Award. Congratulations to Telemundo, and thank you for your partnership and service. I would now like to direct your attention to the screens for a short video outlining the NALEO Educational Fund Telemundo partnership.
El momento es ahora.
Usa tu voz. Que se escuchen esas voces.
Decisión 2020 brought to life all of the amazing aspects that makes Telemundo shine with our audience.
A partir de hoy, usted puede ir a haztecontar.com y buscar información. Lo importante es ser contados.
Cada persona puede ser contada en el censo.
La conferencia de NALEO se llevará a cabo mañana y pasado.
Monica, I'll start with you.
This is definitely a population that is motivated to vote.
It's very important they get out and vote on the issues that they care about.
¿Cómo, cuándo, dónde emites tu voto?
Because it's time to vote.
Cada voto está siendo contado.
Decision 2020 has been one of the most important initiatives that we've done, not only for us as a brand, but also for all of our employees, for Latinos across the country.
We are thrilled to continue our partnership and look forward to the work we will continue to do together for years to come. Now, here to accept the NALEO President's Award on behalf of Telemundo, On behalf of Telemundo is Ms. Cristina Colbert-Yorsen, Senior Vice President, Corporate and External Affairs from the NBC Universal Telemundo Enterprises. Well, please give her a round of applause.
Hello, and thank you, President Lara, for this honor, your kind words, and this generous award. Thank you as well to NALEO Chief Executive Officer Arturo Vargas, the NALEO Education Fund, NALEO board members, elected officials, and partners, and the many distinguished guests here today. On behalf of NBC Universal Telemundo Enterprises and our chairman, Bo Ferrari, let me express my heartfelt gratitude and for honoring us with this President's Award. NALEO is an outstanding organization, which Telemundo is immensely proud to partner and share so many values with, by ensuring the Latino community is understood, valued, and supported. This is indeed a special honor to be here in Chicago accepting this award. And Telemundo could not have done this without the support of so many. NALEO's leadership board, the amazing staff, and I would be remiss not to mention our elected officials and partners who have always brought such generosity, support, and ongoing commitment to our work together. Our long-standing partnership is not only valued, but it is necessary. As NALEO's official Spanish language media partner for the last several years, it is a responsibility that we do not take lightly. As everyone here knows so well, Latinos are not just a demographic story. We are influencing every aspect of our society, our political system, our culture, and our economy. Without a doubt, the future of America is directly tied to the future of Latinos. Our influence is only growing stronger and deeper. We are living at a critical time that could refine the role of the Hispanic community in our country. And it is important to deliver reliable news and information, especially during moments of inflection in our country. Telemundo continues to be the choice and voice of Latinos today, an accomplishment that comes with responsibility to serve and empower our community in times like these, something that NALEO understands so well. A responsibility like this is many-pronged. The responsibility to provide our community with the news they need, the entertainment they want, the resources and opportunities that help the Latino community thrive. The responsibility we feel to strengthen the community we represent at our core. NALEO is a vital partner to these efforts, and even more so during the pandemic and election cycles. Together, through Telemundo's Planifica tu Vacuna and NALEO's Juntos Podemos campaign, we join forces to provide information and resources to the Latino community regarding the COVID-19 vaccine. And again, through Hazte Contar and Hágase Contar, we partnered to count the Latino community across the country for the crucial 2020 census. And it doesn't end there. Together, we have worked on Naturalization Day campaigns, voter registration efforts, to facilitate the full Latino participation in the American political process. We've come together across so many wonderful initiatives to lift up and increase the voice of our community. So President Lara and everyone gathered here today, thank you for your ongoing work and commitment. We are grateful for our shared mission and look forward to continuing the work alongside all of you in service of our community for many years to come. Thank you for this honor. We are deeply humbled.
Congratulations again to Telemundo, and thank you for those great remarks, Christina. We really appreciate it and really look forward to a long-term relationship with Telemundo. Thank you. Gracias. Before we continue to lunch itself, I wanted to do a quick shout out to some special guests with us. I mean, we're all special. Let's get it right. We're all special. But there's two guests with us today, this afternoon, that we want to acknowledge. First, Congressman Tony Cardenas, who is with us today. Let's give him a round of applause. And I think he's around, so you could say hi to him. He's a great guy. And I also would like to recognize my dear friend, Long Beach Mayor Robert Garcia, who is also a candidate for California's 42nd Congressional District. If elected, Mayor Garcia will become the first LGBTQ+ immigrant and Peruvian American to serve in Congress. Let's give him a round of applause. Now, I'm sure many of you are hungry, but after lunch, be sure to stay for this afternoon's plenary session. Don't leave Latino votes on the table. So thank you again, and enjoy your lunch.
NALEO President Ricardo Lara.
Hello again, NALEO familia. We can have your attention. I want to just, first, before we continue, I want to just tell Nora that I want to thank her for texting my mom about the session this morning. I got a text back and my mom says que no está enojada, which I have no idea what that means. So it's going to be a long flight back home. So, well, I hope you're feeling re-energized after lunch, because up next we have a very exciting plenary session called Don't Leave Latino Votes on the Table, moderated by Ms. Nicole Suarez, National Telemundo anchor and news host of Hoy Día. Joining her will be our panelists, Mr. Mike Madrid, Principal of Grassroots Lab, Mr. Chuck Rocha, President of Solidarity Strategies, and of course our very own Arturo Vargas, Chief Executive Officer of NALEO and NALEO Educational Fund. Give them a round of applause, please.
Hello, everybody. How's Chicago doing today? This is my hometown, by the way. I'm so excited to be back and joined by these three gentlemen that really have so much insight for us today. We've seen, what was that? Nice chair. Are you comfortable? Get comfy because we got 45 minutes. So we've seen how the Latino vote has constantly changed, how it's become more politically savvy, educated, informed. But of course we have to start talking about what happened today in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided to overturn Roe versus Wade. This is a decision that's going to affect millions of women across the United States. Will this have an impact in the midterm elections? Chuck.
I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about this on Twitter today. There's going to be a lot of discussions in the midterm elections. And by the way, shout out to all my brothers and sisters here. It's so good to be back here in person again. It is really, really good to be back here. Arturo, thanks for having us. I wanted to start that way. Shout out to the Texas delegation. I wore my boots for you, just so you know, with the Texas on them. So look, I think that I'm worried that Democrats will overplay, and I'm worried that Republicans will underplay, and I think at the end of the day it'll be a wash, but I think it will have impact in sectors of our community, especially state by state. And most of what I've seen in 30 years of doing this work is that if this particular issue is important to you, you've picked a team. Mm-hmm. You're already on team red or team blue. And so I think what you're seeing today is going to motivate both bases. And what I'm really particularly looking at is folks who don't normally vote in off-year elections. And will this be a motivating factor on both sides, Republican or Democrat, to show up?
Mike, you've looked at the polls, at the numbers. Is this going to increase voter turnout, do you think?
Yeah, and thank you all for having me. It's great to be back with NALEO. I think my first NALEO conference was 1998. Yeah, so...
Maybe.
Lunch, I think, was the same exact lunch we had back in 1998.
Probably.
Look, I do believe it's going to have a significant impact. And the reason why is this. There's only two really measurable, discernible voting groups that are still moving. The first, which you hear a lot about, is white, college-educated, suburban women moving away from the Republican Party and moving towards the Democratic Party. On the other side, you have our community, largely non-college educated Latinos. The fastest growth is US-born, moving towards the Republican Party. This issue, in particular, tends to be a strong motivating issue for that white suburban women, and that's the way Democrats are talking about it. As a polling issue, Latinos are perhaps the most evenly divided and evenly split on this issue. There's this misconception that we're all Catholic, so we're following the church's direction on this. The truth is most social issues have never been driving issues for the majority of Latinos. Of course, there are individuals. I'm sure there are people in this room that feel differently. That's as it should be in a good, healthy democracy. The bottom line is, if younger women, and that's increasingly Latinas in this country, do feel exceptionally motivated by this issue, it could have a significant impact in the turnout votes that could benefit Democrats as a mobilizing issue. I tend to believe that is more likely than not.
So we'll go back to the midterm elections and what campaigns to do to garner that Latino vote. But Arturo, I want to go back to the census. Obviously, we've seen the reports that the Latino population was significantly undercounted during this 2020 census. What are the repercussions of that? What are the consequences of that for our community?
Thank you, Nicole. And once again, thank you to my good friends, Chuck and Mike, for being part of this conversation today. I first want to thank everybody in this room who worked with us to promote census participation. This was a historic moment to try to count the population during just unparalleled circumstances. 63 million Latinos were counted in the census, accounting for half of the total nation's population growth at the same time that we experienced a 5% undercount, the largest undercount of Latinos since 1990, when we were only about 20 million. So take into account the fact that 5% of 63 million, we're probably more like 68 million in the country. And those numbers are not being reflected in how the U.S. House of Representatives was reapportioned. So when we wondered, hey, why did Texas only pick up 2 seats instead of the 3, when Texas was one of the states with a statistically significant undercount? Why did Florida only pick up 1 seat instead of 2, given its large Latino population? So there were consequences to the Latino undercount. And then you layer that with how the districts were drawn that did not take into account the true number of Latinos living across the country. So the undercount had a significant impact, I believe, on Latino electoral progress because it will limit our representation. Now, we're stuck with it. There's nothing we can do about the numbers used to reapportion and redistrict, but there's much we can do with the numbers that will be used going forward to apportion $1.5 trillion every single year, and we need to get on top of the Census Bureau now to make changes for 2030.
And I know that at Telemundo, we were also a big part of that effort as well. We did a couple panels together during the pandemic, trying to get people to participate in the census. So Chuck, Mike, how do we navigate this current political landscape and these decisions that are being based on the census now?
I think that what you're seeing is a population of folks that Arturo is good about talking about this and being our mouthpiece about. Sure, there's lots of Latinos, lots of Hispanics in Texas and Florida, New York, and California. But now we're outgrowing those borders, and our political campaigns aren't keeping track with that. So what that means is we are still running campaigns based off of old white people voting, and they still vote at a higher majority than all people because there's just more of them, but we're reproducing faster than they are, and we're being undercounted. But you're seeing the effect of our power in the way that these new congressional districts that are abruptly being drawn not to have our inclusion, but still have our inclusion because they can't run away from the growth overall. So instead of every Latino being super packed into these super Democrat or Republican districts, like the Javier Becerra seat, or the seat down in South Florida, or the Castro seat in San Antonio, we all know those seats. They're 90% Latino, right? Well, what you're seeing now is the Latino population getting outside of that, growing over into the suburban seats, where for the first time in American history, you have Latinos that are more than 35% of a population of over 8 different marginal congressional seats that are half Republican and half Democrat. In Florida, Texas, Colorado, New Mexico, and 3 in California, where we, our gente, will literally decide who will control Congress in the next term, the Democrats or the Republicans, not to mention even the Senate with Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia.
But will Latinos actually come out in those districts, participate, have their voices heard, and actually define the future of this country in essence?
I think the less concentrated we are in districts, the greater the likelihood of us increasing our turnout. And the reason why is really, if you look at it like this, I would rather, as a political strategist, I would rather have 100 districts with 30% Latino representation than 30 districts with 100% Latino registration. And the reason why is, because we are a younger community, our numbers over every election cycle are going to grow. And what we're going to do is, by the end of this decade, have a much, much greater reach than we currently do under the new construct. So I think part of this is just the way that you look at it. But as the more isolated we were as a community in each specific district, the less incentive current members had to actually drive turnout up, or even view the community as competitive and spend the resources to build infrastructure to make sure that we were turning out. The more competitive we are between the two parties, the more dollars, the more focus, the more campaign activity is going to be targeting our community, and that provides a way to kind of lift state by state our numbers to a much higher turnout level.
Arturo, what is being done to register Latino voters in those districts that are non-majority Latino?
Well, I don't think enough is being done. We issued projections at Naleo Educational Fund earlier this year about how many Latinos we think will vote in November of this midterm election. We came up with a number of 11.6 million, looking at the 5 past midterm elections and looking at those trends. So we think that the same number of Latinos who voted in 2018, which is a historic turnout election, that we're going to mirror those numbers in 2022. Now, are we satisfied with that? No. We consider that to be a floor. We would like to see that number increase because, in fact, the number of Latinos who are eligible to vote has significantly increased since 2018, with all the young people who have been turning a voting age. So what we need are candidates and campaigns to actually invest in mobilizing Latinos in a meaningful way. And more important than not, they need to speak to the issues on the minds of Latino voters. And this is where I think some of the political parties make a big mistake. They assume what it is important to Latino voters, and they speak to those issues, and they miss the boat about what the true issues are on the mind of the majority of voters as they think about who to vote for.
So Mike, I think we've always talked about how immigration is one of these points that is so important to the Latino community. Is that correct? Incorrect? What are the issues that are really the driving force behind our community?
Well, that's a great question. There are issues that are important, and then there are issues that are important. And obviously, the immigration experience, our community is much closer to that experience. We're living it oftentimes day by day. And so there's a natural affinity for it. However, there's very, very little data over the course of the past 30 years that shows that immigration is a top 1 or 2 issue. Overwhelmingly, the top 1 or 2 issues are the economy and education, oftentimes followed by healthcare, sometimes very closely, and then you'll start to see immigration sort of creep up into that issues matrix. I believe there's been a very strong over-reliance from leaders in our community, politicians in our community, driving a media narrative that focuses almost exclusively on the immigration issue. It is a very important issue. We've needed to address it. But as much as we have an affinity for that issue and a sensitivity to it, when polling tells us over decades that it is not the #1 concern, what I would suggest is if we were getting the same type of media focus and attention from legislators in our own community, focused on education and the economy as a Latino issue, we would have significantly higher turnout and significantly greater competition between the parties. And I think we're finally getting to that point where we are evolving and maturing and transforming as a community beyond sort of these stereotypical issues that have defined us for the past couple of decades. And unfortunately, of course, we haven't done anything on education or immigration for the past few decades, so the issue has stuck. But I think there's an increasing awareness, especially as the numbers of policymakers increase, that's not the top issue in most communities. And the focus of their work is going to have to be primarily on education and the economy.
And we've talked time and time again about how Latinos are not a monolith. We are from different countries. We have different religions, different beliefs. You know, we are so diverse. So how do you actually target the Latino voter? What is the key, Chuck?
I think that's probably the $10,000, $20,000, or if you're a Republican, $50,000 question. We're different. This panel shows we're different. Our skin tone is different. Our families came from different countries. and they came at different times. I'm a third generation Texas. If you heard me on the radio, you would think I'm an old white man because of my accent, but I'm as Mexican as my daddy was Mexican, right? Well, Mike Madrid is also Mexican, but grew up in California. Not only do we differ on our political parties, but we also differ on the way that we look at the world, right? This is the nuance that we get left out of conversations, not only with Democrats, which everybody who follows me on Twitter knows I'm a big pusher, let's just say, of making sure that things are done the right way, but also I ain't got no love for no Republicans either. You gotta go talk to our community. Me and Mike started a podcast called The Latino Vote.
It's amazing, I've been listening.
Thank you. To talk about how you could help our community, and let's have the debate on how you help, but show up and be there for the community. Calling out each of the parties to say, come to our community. Come to where we are, and let's have that debate every single day. The biggest difference in what's happening in today's campaign is none of us are at the table. The state legislator shows up, the reporter shows up, you're given the multicultural lens, you're given the Latino lens, you can handle Latino outreach. But the campaigns are still run by rich white people, whether you're a man or a woman, they just are. And they don't understand the nuances that me and you've talked about backstage in 15 minutes about the difference between a Colombian, the difference between somebody that grew up in Miami, somebody who grew up on a trailer park in East Texas like me, or somebody who lives in a $10 million mansion like Mike Madrid. It's all Mexican, I'm just saying.
But Mike, would you say that the efforts are actually there? We've all heard about the sleeping giants, the power behind the Latino community, but the reality is that we are just not there. We might have the power, but we are not using that power.
Yeah.
So are the efforts there?
No, look, I've been doing races for 30 years now, and the truth is, I can say this, certainly as the Republican Party, they have never been there in any genuine, real, concerted ways. I do believe that's changing. I'll talk about that in a second. But I will also say this. One of the reasons why I was able to keep a lot of my clients, candidates, and issues competitive was the Democrats aren't there either, right? They've had a lower bar because Republicans have made it really easy to vote against. But there's a difference between voting against a party and voting for a party. And I think that's really where our community is in the middle in making these determinations, and why we're starting to see this movement right. I believe that this shift rightward is very, very real. There's tons of data to demonstrate it. But it's not as much a pro-Republican platform as it is this unrelatability of where the Democratic Party is going. And so left between those two choices, it's natural that you're going to see this rightward drift. And so we're beginning to take on the characteristics of the overall electorate. Now, real briefly, what I would say is this. Governor Abbott in Texas just announced a $2.8 million media buy directed towards the Latino community, Hispanic community in Texas. That is unheard of for a candidate of either party in June. Okay, we used to go out and do press conferences in the last 30 days, both parties would do it, and they'd say, yeah, we're gonna do a 7-figure buy. 7-figure meant we'd barely get to $1 million over the next 7-8 days. In a state like California, that doesn't get you anything. When the governor of Texas says we're going to put up $2.8 million, they're serious. That's not a show buy, as we call it. That is a real, dramatic investment in the community, because if Beto O'Rourke doesn't get 55% of the Hispanic vote in Texas, there's no path to victory for him.
Definitely. Arturo, we also have seen an increment in these campaigns of disinformation directed towards the Latino community. What can be done to stop this, to battle this, to fix this issue?
Yeah, and that's something that we've taken greater concern of at Naleo Educational Fund, about the state of disinformation, misinformation, not just in elections, which is something that we're particularly concerned about this year, but when we saw it around COVID-19 vaccine uptakes, we saw it around the census, we've seen it historically. You know, I remember when people would say, well, I'm not going to become a US citizen because I have to spit on the Mexican flag. You know, we've had a history of disinformation and misinformation aimed at Latinos to keep them from participating. So one of the things we're going to do soon is to launch an initiative called Defiende la Verdad, to engage this network in promoting accurate information and calling out misinformation, so that our community has the opportunity to get accurate and timely information on the truth, especially on the election process. And we'll be focusing on that this year.
Well, definitely, and you both also have been working on getting the proper information out to the community across your social media platforms, across this podcast, The Latino Vote, which is excellent. I recommend all of you guys go listen to, because you have so much insight.
Smart woman right there.
So much insight. What do you feel is the biggest issue when it comes to disinformation?
I think that the biggest thing is nobody shows up in our community. I hate to keep going back to that. But what I'm getting at here is Mike made a point about $2.8 million of Spanish language TV by a Republican running in Texas, right? Well, think about this week, I released a gun ad in Spanish about Uvalde because I was aggravated that our community in Texas couldn't even get a Spanish language press conference, right? And so if you take that one little microcosm of news in a rural place like Texas and think about how no one is talking to us, so we're super reliant on our friends and networks to get information through social media, through YouTube channels, through Facebook groups, where you start having even your crazy uncle who's putting things on the internet that ain't exactly right. Because we know your uncle, your Tio, ain't actually right anyway. So you're going to now get your news from your Tio who drinks a little too much and you know he's crazy anyway, right? This is the point I'm making. Like, there's not a lot for English speakers, people that are not consuming multi-generational information in 2 languages, sometimes 3, it's easier to disseminate misinformation. But for our group, who are more newly immigrants, who are the average age of 27, so they're not watching network TV on average, who, like my son who's 30, doesn't even have cable, so I don't know how he runs his life. He's got 2, how do you not have cable? And so it's these nuances that you could be, oh, well, that makes sense, Chuck. This is why, because there's nobody really trying to talk to our community except at the very end with Mike Madrid saying, let's run up 2 weeks of Spanish TV like we've seen a million times, and it's just not working.
So I want to actually take this opportunity. Everybody should take out their cell phones right now. Follow on Twitter. What is your Twitter handle?
At Chuck Rocha, hashtag Brown Consultants Matter.
You can follow me on Twitter at Madrid_Mike.
At Arturo Naleo.
And this is exactly how we are going to make sure that the proper information keeps circulating and making sure that our community stays informed. I want to talk about Texas and how we just saw how the Republican Mayra Flores was able to win a traditionally Democratic seat. What can we learn from that campaign specifically, how they ran it?
Well, let me jump in before Mike does as a resident Texan here and say there's a lot of things we can learn. But there's a lot of things that people should understand, that this district is not the district that she will run in November. In November, because of redistricting, they moved all the Democrats from the district next door into this district, so it's a D+15. You're all politicians. You understand a D+15 district. It's a safe seat. In the special election, she ran in a D+5. And then nobody showed up because it was a special election in the middle of summer right after school let out. The Republicans also smartly, you heard the old liberal Democrats say smartly, went down there and spent a ton of money to elect her, millions of dollars, so that if she might win, they could then go back and go, look what we can do with Latinos. Look at these Hispanic women showing up to vote Republican, which is a narrative they then can take back to all their donors and raise even more money, which is brilliant strategy. While Democrats said, don't worry about it. If she wins, she'll just be renting the seat for 6 months. Vicente, the congressman next door, is going to win it, guaranteed in November. It's a D+15. So these are the things that our party just gets wrong. Are we going to sacrifice that narrative for 6 months? Now I have to fight Mike Madrid, who's like, we got this Latino thing figured out all day long, right? This is what we've got wrong, is this part of the conversation. Mike, I know you agree.
Yeah, let me add on a little bit more, because this is where it gets exciting. The Democrats have a really significant problem here, and Chuck is right. It begins with this sort of dismissive belief that it's not really a problem. What I will say is I talked to a lot of white progressive consultants in DC who basically said it's a rental, it's a special election, it's not that big of a deal, we're going to win the seat back anyway, and the Democrats in all likelihood will. The Latino operatives are saying, this is what we hear all the time. Latino Democratic operatives are saying, this is what we hear all the time. let me tell you a couple things about this district. It has the second highest Hispanic concentration by population of any district in the United States of America, okay? All the Democratic consultants I'm talking to are saying, yeah, but it's only a Biden +5. Man, if you're a Democrat getting +5 from your best candidate in the second highest Hispanic concentrated district in America, you're toast. So the fact that Republicans are even making incursions into there and confidently spending money in there, and the Democrats are writing it off saying, it's not a big deal, don't pay attention to it. What that really means is they're going to have to come up with a 50-point swing to be competitive. You're hearing a lot less about Texas going blue now than you were previous to 2020, and this is why. There is no investment, none, in a real meaningful sense. The narrative is important, but if you think it's just about narrative, you are missing the fundamentals of what is happening in the country today. This is a very serious effort. And again, on top of all the money spent by the Republican National Committee to go win this seat, the Abbott money is on top of that. So if you think you're going to get these margins back, and the margins you need, we're talking, folks, 2012 Obama margins, not 2016 Hillary Clinton margins, which shrunk by 7%, and not Joe Biden numbers, which shrunk again by 7%, and certainly not Myra Flores's, where you're upside down and losing the vote in the second highest concentrated district in America with Hispanics. So yeah, I feel a little bit passionate about it, and I see an opportunity there, and if you don't see that as a 5-alarm fire bell, as a Democratic Party, you're just not paying attention, and the Republicans are doing absolutely everything right, making the investments in those communities right now.
Arturo, would you consider as well that the Latino vote is being taken for granted now in 2022?
Well, that's been historically what we've seen. Last-minute investments in mobilizing Latinos, not a strategy from the beginning in terms of investing into the Latino electorate. And what it has to be is sustained. And that's one of the things we've learned from talking to Latino voters, is that they get disillusioned when the only time they hear from campaigns or candidates or political parties is every 2 or 4 years, and they get ignored the rest of the time. So many Latino voters have lost faith that voting will make a difference because they feel ignored. And that has been borne out in our research year after year after year, coupled with the fact that when they do show up to talk to them, they're talking about immigration.
Right.
They're not talking about what's on their minds right now. Right now, they're worried about inflation. They're worried about the price of gasoline. They're worried about homelessness if they're in a city like Los Angeles. And if candidates don't speak to those issues in this election, they are taking the vote for granted.
Definitely. And for all the people that are present here today, I think it's very important for them to be able to walk away with something tangible, something that they can put into practice automatically in their day-to-day efforts. What can they do to garner the Latino vote and maximize this political power?
There needs to be more of us. This room should be 15 times as big as it is. So I think that mentorship, I think whether you're an elected official or if you're a consultant or whether you're a community leader, it's this next generation that feels so despondent about voting, who feel despondent right now about anything. There was a Harvard research that just came out on Generation Z or X or whatever they're calling the young kids today, but they're all depressed and worried and don't know what to do, right? This is what we should be doing, is making more of us in this piece. Mentor programs and hiring them to run campaigns. This is the biggest thing. In the top 50 congressional districts in America right now for Democrats, there's not one single Latino campaign manager. There's not one single Latino-owned media firm. There's not one single Latino-owned mail firm in a top 50 race. This is a problem, and it's on us to make sure we break that cycle. Arturo's been talking about this since I've been old enough to know who Arturo was. This is our responsibility to call out our own party and to call out the Republican Party and any other party who don't let us have a seat at that table. Because the only way we're going to change this is change it ourselves.
Definitely. Mike.
Yeah, one of the reasons that Chuck and I began our communications, and again, we met when I was working on the Lincoln Project, and Chuck had just finished up on the Bernie Sanders campaign. I'd been aware of his work for a long time. He'd been aware of mine, but we'd never had the opportunity to work together before.
I normally don't call Republicans, but
but he knew that he needed to learn something, so he picked up the phone and called us.
Y'all should really listen to the podcast. This goes on for an hour on the podcasting.
And the thing we immediately recognized was we both first, foundationally, fundamentally, have a real passion for our people and for our community. And the way that we could help was by not only calling out our party, which we both have demonstrated at the highest levels of our parties doing that, but also our commitment, and maybe it's just a function of being older now, of just saying, you know what, we have to mentor a new generation of people ourselves, because we didn't have a lot of folks that were actually crunching numbers and organizing precincts in our communities when we were coming of age, but there are a lot of young people. So let me answer your question specifically. First, absolutely mentor and find other candidates. If you look at the history of most state legislatures, there was always one legislator back in the day who took it upon him or herself to go out and recruit other candidates. The second is not everybody wants to be a candidate. And if you've got people who are interested in being in the consulting profession, we all know that the real power in politics is with the consultants. I thought I'd get a better laugh out of that. Not at all. No, but we actually play a very important role. That was a joke. And let me make a particular plea to you. There are not nearly enough Latinas in the field of political consulting. Okay? Latinas are absolutely the future, not just of our community, but of this country. Our Latina community has a long history, and we all know this anecdotally, of looking to the women in our families and our communities for political leadership. If you look at the actual gender splits in the Congress, in the state legislatures, and certainly at the local school levels, Hispanic, Latina women are elected at a significantly higher rate than non-Hispanic whites. There is a lot that this country is going to learn about the feminization of our governance, our society, and our community as we continue to grow. And we are accomplishing things with gender balance in just a decade that this country has not been able to accomplish since suffrage 100 years ago. So I'm excited by that, but we need more women who can understand that communication in a way that Chuck and I simply can't. And I'm very, very comfortable with that and very excited about recruiting the potential future, because that's how we're going to make change.
Arturo.
Well, let me pick up on the point that you just made, Madrid, about the role of Latinas, because one of the things we've recognized at Naleo Educational Fund through our research about who are the most effective messengers to motivate Latinos to take some kind of sort of civic engagement action, whether it's registering to vote, going to vote, filling out your census forms. Who are the most trusted messengers? Another member of your family. And who in your family is the most convincing? The woman.
Your mama.
Mom, yeah.
The wife, the mother, the girlfriend, the sister. Si mi mamá me dice que me registre a votar, I guess I'll do it. You know, and so we have in the past conducted campaigns to encourage Latinas not just to participate, but to be catalysts themselves for civic participation. And I think that is one of the strategies we need to build upon. Again, carrying on your point.
Is there anything else that they can put into action today?
Speak to the issues that Latinos really care about. Do not assume what the issues are that are important to Latino voters. Again, at this moment, in this election cycle, it's inflation, it's the effect of the economy, homelessness, quality of life issues. 2 years ago, COVID-19. consistently was the #1 issue. It's no longer relevant to Latino voters in how they're going to vote in this election cycle. It's inflation and economy. If you're not speaking on those issues to Latino voters, you're not talking. You're tone deaf.
Oh, damn.
Well, unfortunately, our time is up, so we have to wrap up this conversation.
I was promised I'd get to hang out with the vice president.
She's coming.
Okay, she's
coming.
All
She'll
right.
be here shortly.
Okay.
But I want to thank you all for such insightful information, por acercarnos un poco más a nuestra comunidad, for all the work that you do. I think that these two together are obviously the representation of what's important, right? Republican, Democrat, all parties working together for the Latino vote, for the best thing for our community. So thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being such a great crowd, and have a wonderful Naleo conference.
Don't go. Don't go.
Are we supposed to go?
How was that conversation? Please help me thank once again Nicole Suarez for moderating this session, and my good friends Mike Madrid and Chuck Rocha for joining us today. And I love it because they represent the power of the Naleo network. We've been working with those individuals now for literally decades, and they come to know each other through convenings like these, working across party lines, trying to find that common ground that can move our community forward. Again, the power of the Naleo network. I'd like to recognize two other special guests who are here with us. The Honorable Ambassador Gary Vasquez, a past member of the Naleo Board of Directors, past Vice President of Naleo. Thank you, sir, for being here. And one of my colleagues, the President and CEO of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, Marco Davis. I saw you earlier, Marco. Hope you're here today. Thank you for being here. So I have updated information regarding this afternoon's events. As I had mentioned earlier, if you would like to stay and listen to the Vice President's remarks in a short while, you need to be in this room by 1:50. After that, the doors will close. No one else will be allowed in. So there will be a break here for you to mingle around, network. Go, please, help us complete the wellness health kits. It'll still be set up there so that you can do that. It's going to benefit the Northwest Service Center and Mujeres Latinas en Acción here in Chicago. After the Vice President speaks, and once she is cleared for security reasons, then you will be allowed to leave the ballroom. But we will have, again, a very short window during which to be able to transport you to our evening event at the Godfrey Hotel, which begins at 5 o'clock. We will have 2 rounds of buses to provide that transportation. The first one will be right after the VP's remarks, and we'll start loading at 3:30 p.m. So think about how much time you will have if you want to go up to your room and change. You need to be on those first round of buses by 3:30, and it'll be at the front lobby, the front exit of the hotel. There will be a second round of buses once the Vice President has cleared the property, but that won't start until 5 o'clock. Loading will be at 5 o'clock, and those buses will depart at 5:15. You must have, I don't even have it with me, your credential is absolutely mandatory for you to be able to attend tonight's event. Now, if you choose to leave the event center, please know that you have to exit through the way that you came in, but security now will only be limited to the wands, so that may slow down the ability for you to re-enter this security zone. And if you're not in here by 1:50, even though you previously have been cleared, you may not be able to then be part of this afternoon's session. If you miss one of the buses or you don't want to wait until 5 o'clock, again, the Godfrey Hotel is about a 15, 20-minute walk away. It's about a mile away. Get your steps in, do some exercise. That's always an opportunity. And that event is from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock. I'm going to turn to my colleagues to make sure if I have not missed anything. Okay, I got it all. So once again, everybody, thank you for being part of the NALEO 39th Annual Conference. Enjoy the next few minutes of networking and be back here by 1:50 for what will truly be another historic moment for the NALEO Annual Conference. Thank you.